Our next reader is Erik Molvar. Erik is a wildlife biologist and has worked as a professional conservationist and a guidebook author for 16 years. He lives in Laramie, Wyoming.
Well, it's Wyoming, and there's a microphone, so I must be talking about the Red Desert. This piece here that I wrote for this anthology is called Requiem for Desert Elk. And I've talked a lot about the Red Desert from the perspective of a photographer, of a conservationist, of a hiker, of a hunter. But I wanted to tell this story through the eyes of one of the native residents of the Red Desert. And of course, I'm a professional biologist, so this gets tricky because I know that animals don't have personalities. They have animalities. They have their own tendencies. They have their own ways of thinking that we can never really truly know. And so that I decided to write this in the third person omniscient in order to not try and pretend to know what is in the mind of the elk, but merely show what the elk might be seeing. I'll read a part of an excerpt from near the beginning of the piece. The drop-tine bull was born high on the slopes of the Oregon Buttes, where a north-facing couloir trapped just enough moisture to foster a stand of aspens. Before him stretched a sea of sagebrush, dappled by pink and white mantles of phlox, and tinged purple with lupin and larkspur. The windswept rims curved downward toward green swards of wiry grass and thorny greasewood gathered in flats where alkali salts collected. The desert was verdant today, in mid-June, but soon the grass would cure off to a tawny brown. Soon the late spring thunder showers would dwindle, and skies desiccated by the furnace blast of summer would stir up choking dust. But on this day, the newborn calf plopped wetly into cool green grasses among tree trunks carved with graffiti nudes from long ago sheep herders. Licked clean by its mother, the calf wobbled to its feet, instinctively squeaking for its first taste of milk. This calf was born at the right time, just as spring greens rose up at the peak of early growth, rich in nutrients. As summer progressed, the succulents would dry out, their nutrients depleted. Thick walls of cellulose would make the dried and cured grasses and wildflowers hard for a four-chambered stomach to digest. For now, though, the mother elk's milk was rich and grassy with nutritious new growth. This was a solitary time. The dam would stash the young calf beneath a tall sagebrush or in a cluster of chokecherry shrubs, white spots and an absence of scent keeping him hidden from coyotes and the vigilant eyes of golden eagles. Off his mother would wander, sometimes half a mile or more, where she could fuel her need for high-protein forage while drawing the attention of predators away from her offspring. Day after day, the calf was left alone, curled beneath the sagebrush on the high slopes of the butte. Below him stretched a landscape seemingly unchanged for 1,000 years. The young elk could not know that for eons, small clusters of copper-colored two-leggeds had huddled in shelters of brush, and later in conical lodges of hide in the sagebrush below. An attentive eye could still discern rings of stones to mark their teepees and ancient hearths. These inquisitive beings chipped stones into sharp tools and made fire for their own purposes. Too slow to catch larger animals by speed, instead they used guile and cooperation, building drive lines of stone to funnel prey off low cliffs. After 10,000 years of wandering afoot, a new and speedy form of transport arrived at the lodges of the two-leggeds in the form of horses, traded or captured from far to the south. The horse evolved in these arid steppes, but vanished entirely from the continent during the ice ages. Mastering horsemanship, the tribes became mobile and aggressive, and better able to pursue the herds of great woolly bison. Trade with tribes from the trackless boreal forests of the north brought the arrival of thundersticks. The Cree were in contact with a new, pale tribe of French-speaking two-leggeds, who sought the pelts of beavers and other soft-furred animals. In trade, the Cree obtained the trinkets and technology, including thundersticks that could fling a tiny lead projectile with deadly force. The ancestors of the drop-tine bull experienced the coming of the horse and the thunderstick to the bands of the two-leggeds as a real threat. In former years, elk were killed only occasionally, when the two-leggeds took them by surprise. But this flourishing of the horse culture brought among the indigenous two-leggeds would improve as brief as it was glorious. In the distance, the snowy crags that would come to be called the Wind River Range rose beyond the sagebrush gap of the Great Divide that would come to be labeled South Pass. Through this gap poured caravans of ox-drawn contraptions, lurching across the divide with cargoes of pale-skinned two-leggeds. These foreigners brought with them deadly diseases, dreams of empire, and an acquisitive drive to own and dominate the land. But the young calf marked none of these comings and goings of primates on the sage lands below. From where he lay, evidence of the two-leggeds and their dominion was nowhere apparent. The extinction of great herds of buffalo, the disappearance of the wolf, the great bear and the mountain lion to make way for dim-witted herds of cattle and sheep, the near disappearance and subsequent repopulation of the fleet pronghorn, all these things had come to pass long before. The young calf nestled in a succession of shady hideaways, growing rapidly on its mother's milk, receiving visits from pygmy rabbits peering out from the sagebrush, flitting songbirds with their melodious mating calls, and the occasional burrowing owl turning its head around backward to peer at the dappled young mammal in his shady depression. For the elk, the world was new.